On today's show, we talk about whether you might have hidden money in our Heads Up. We talk about how technology is changing the way you interact with cash and finance for the big topic. And we chat to a FinTech developer for real talk. We are live. It's 4 p.m. and this is the Moneycast by MyBank. Welcome back to episode 7 of the Moneycast by MyBank. This week we're taking on FinTech and all things technology and money. Before we go into that, let's just start with the usual. If you do want to get a hold of us, these are our social media channels. You can join us live at 4 p.m. every week on any of these channels, or just drop us a like or a comment anytime you like. If you're live watching now, hello, welcome to the stream. You can put something in the chat right now and we'll try and answer questions live for you as we go. I know Instagram, you guys need to filter through, so it might be a little bit delayed if you're asking questions on Instagram, but do ask them anyway and we'll try and get them answered. If you do want to send us anything via email, anything you want us to put into our news segments, if you want to feature on the show, or if you just want to send a hello message, you can email us at info@mybank.org. As always, my man Declan is in the chat ready to help, so if you need to ask anything in the chat, Declan is there with some information. And as always, my name is Nick Smith Patel. I'm the head of education for young adults at MyBank, and I'm your host for the Moneycast. Without further ado, let's get straight into it, and let's get into Heads Up. So we've got some big ones this week, and the first one might be something you're interested in if you're on the kind of 16 to 18 age range, and that is about child trust funds. You might have heard about these. Child trust funds were given to people at a certain time by the government, and it turns out that some people might have some money in a child trust fund that you're owed very, very soon that you don't know about. Let's take a look at some of the details you might need to know. So if you have a child trust fund, you will have been born between the 1st of September 2002 and the 2nd of January 2011. So if that applies to you, listen up. There may be a child trust fund in your name, especially if you are a looked after young person. There may be a trust fund in your name you're not aware of, but your parents may have had one set up for them if they were on a low income as well. So you need to make sure this is going to affect you because it probably does have an account for you somewhere. From the age of 16, you can take control of that account. You can move that money to an ISA. We talked about savings and investments the other day. You could choose to move it to one of those. However, from 18, you can withdraw that cash as you wish, and you can use that as you wish. However, the first people to be able to claim that will turn 18 in September. So if you're going to turn 18 September, October time, very, very likely you may have some money stashed away somewhere that you can now access. Now, you can go to gov.uk/child trust funds for more information. They also have a tool there that you can use to track down a lost account. So if you're not sure if you've got an account or if you're not sure what the details are, you have to put in a few details on the government website and that will help you search back and try and find it. And big push, because in September, that money, if you're owed it, it's yours. Make sure you get it. Next up, we're going to talk about housing, and we know that during the coronavirus situation, there's been a Eviction Protection Act enacted, so people can't be evicted from their homes because they can't pay the rent because the coronavirus is messing with everyone's money. That's now been extended. It now extends to August, which is great. However, there's a couple of people I want to kind of point out that are mentioning some things that we need to think about after this is all over, not just while people are in the middle of the crisis. So the first one I want to talk about is this. This is from Dame Gillian Guy, the Chief Exec of Citizen Advice. And they say simply extending the pause of repossession is a sticking plaster, not a cure. People who have fallen behind on rent arrears and those who have been furloughed or lost their jobs need a security of proper reform to the rules governing evictions. Basically saying that it wasn't really working before. Maybe this is the time to make it work even better. And a sentiment echoed actually by Dan Wilson-Craw from Generation Rent, who says the government must use this time it has bought itself to develop a long-term solution to provide rent relief and end unfair evictions for good. You may not know this, but in this country, there's very little protection for renters if a landlord wants to remove you, as long as they do it the correct way, with the right amount of notice and done in the proper legal channels. So a lot of calls for this to maybe pick up the mantle to try and fix how renting works. Do you have any stories about how renting has messed with you? Feel free to put it in the chat. Email us at info@mybank.org. Next up, you know I like to round out these new segments with something that's free. Well, how about free and useful and possibly necessary? You may have heard the news that from the 15th of June on public transport and in some places, face coverings will be required. In fact, on public transport, it's a finable offence to travel without one. So if you're going to need a face covering, you could choose to pay for a face covering online, and they're quite pricey at the moment because everyone's looking for them. You could make one out of a t-shirt or an old handkerchief. But my thing is, there's always loose socks around. Washing machines eat them. You've always got that one random one rattling around in the drawer somewhere. Here's a quick video about how to make a really simple face covering using one of those random phantom socks you've got laying around the house. Check it out. And here's one I made earlier. Hopefully you can still hear me and it's not too muffled, but this is just an old sock I had laying around. Don't need them anymore. So may as well turn it into a free face mask. So if you need to make a face mask, remember that you must wear them on public transport from the 15th of June. There is talk of potentially up to £1,000 fine. So if you want to avoid that and be able to travel, especially if you're a key worker and if you're working in shops, make sure you get yourself one of these sorted, and a nice, easy way to make one. So that's my freebie for the week. That's going to round up our news for the week. Let's get straight into the big topic and let's talk FinTech. I figure I'll take it off because I'm not in any public. There's no one else here. It's just me. It's just me. We're going to talk FinTech, and Beetroot's back. Hello, Beetroot. Welcome. Good to see you again. Always nice to see you. We are going to talk about FinTech, and you might be asking yourself, well, what do you mean? What's FinTech? Well, FinTech is, I like this word, a portmanteau. Portmanteau is when you take two words and mash them up together to make one word, and it's a portmanteau of financial technology. Simple as that. It's stuff that basically makes finance work differently. And there's a lot of examples of how technology has changed finance in the last few years, and we're going to talk about three of them. Three different kind of areas where technology has affected finance and changed the way that some people do things. So let's first of all talk about cryptocurrency. Now, we did a show a while back about investments, and cryptocurrency kind of came up, and a couple of people were asking about some information. I'm going to do this very, very briefly because cryptocurrency is complicated. You might think, well, okay, Bitcoin. It's not just Bitcoin. There are hundreds of different types of currency. In fact, there's currencies popping up all the time. Kodak used to have a currency that they used to use to pay for photographs that people put up on a website. So there's things like Litecoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum. Bitcoin's the most well known, but even then, Bitcoin has a variant. There's Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So what is a cryptocurrency? Well, it's a digital currency. It doesn't have cash attached to it. There are no coins. There are no paper notes. And where, if you imagine a cash transaction, I pay you on the bank, or the bank will keep a ledger of all the things that are happening. What happens with cryptocurrency is that there's a chain of transactions that go together to make a block, and that is the blockchain. It's the chain of all the transactions. And it's a ledger that keeps track of what every Bitcoin has ever done ever. So you might think, okay, great, Bitcoin. I've heard lots about it. How do I get into it? How do I make some money? Well, actually, I was at a point mining Bitcoin, and I mined, I think, a fraction of a Bitcoin, and then I just didn't bother anymore because at the time it took more in electric costs than it did to actually get the value out of the coins. The coins were at like 1 cent a coin, so I just stopped and I didn't bother. Mistake. Currently, Bitcoin is valued at £7,700 a coin as of this morning. So if I'd have just carried on, and it's that thing about risk and reward, isn't it? If I'd have taken the risk, might have had the reward. I chose not to, and I missed out. Now, a lot of people didn't miss out on Bitcoin. The easiest way to make money on Bitcoin was to mine Bitcoin. You don't pay for it. You have a computer. It does some math problems. It works on the blockchain of the transactions before it. And then when it's done enough transactions and math problems, it spits out a coin. Now, everyone who's helped with that set of mathematical equations gets a share of that coin. You can imagine in the early days when there's less people involved, the share was bigger for each person. Now it takes more and more to generate each coin, and more people have to share that coin. So mining has become less and less profitable for someone like you or me with just a normal PC. There are people buying entire special rigs that are just designed to mine Bitcoin. So for some people, it might be an option. The price I saw banded around today when I was doing my research, about £3,000 to £4,000 for a starter mining rig, and that might not turn a profit for a good year or two. So there is another way. You can buy it just like another commodity. We talked about commodity trading the other week. The problem is that you'll probably have to deal with people's fees on top of that. So you won't pay 7,700, you might pay 8,000, and if the price goes down, it's a loss. If the price goes up, happy days. The other problem with Bitcoin is storage. Bitcoin is stored in a digital wallet, and normally that's on a physical device. So when I had my Bitcoin, I had a wallet on my phone. If I ever changed my phone, I had to take a special 16-word password to my new phone to transfer my wallet. If I lost my wallet or my phone or that 16-word passcode, I lost everything in my wallet. Now, I had the equivalent of something like 60p worth of Bitcoin in my wallet, but check this video out of a Welsh man who lost a hell of a lot more than I did.
This story is about watching what you throw out. Not plastics, not recycling, but a fortune. Because for one unfortunate man, he has done just that. The diggers are not searching for a hard drive, yet James Howells wishes they were, because the one he accidentally threw away is now worth millions.
I'm absolutely devastated, to be honest. When I realised what I'd done, it was a oh my god moment, if you will.
The IT technician had the drive in a drawer for years. On it, 7,500 bitcoins, a digital currency that has massively increased in value.
From the very first time I come across Bitcoin, I knew it was going to be a good investment, and I knew it was going to be, the next big thing. Devastating, really.
Bitcoin trades 24/7. It is mined by solving math problems, but is limited. Its value depends on people's confidence in the currency, but although acceptance has increased, it has not yet gone commercial and is not yet featured on major retailer websites.
In some respects, you've lost nothing.
Well, that's true. I didn't have it in the first place, so it's not as if I've had the rug pulled out from under me. I've just not gained anything.
Just not gained anything. Well, at the time when he lost his hard drive, those 7,500 bitcoins were valued at something around £3 million. So it's quite a big loss. Today, those bitcoins are worth, and I've just done the math, £57,750,000. Now, before anyone gets any bright ideas, this landfill is not accepting anyone to come in and do a bit of digging, and they have done what they can to cover the landfill over to stop people from coming to try and find this hard drive. And the hard drive's probably wrecked by now. Bin juice doesn't do well with hard drives. But a lesson in having to be careful with the asset. If you are going to mine cryptocurrency, make sure you keep an eye on where your wallet is. You may lose it forever. Now, the other thing that's kind of changed how banking works is something we call open banking. Now, this is a complicated one, so I found some video to help me. This is from a website called Open Banking, and it's a website that's designed to explain how this all works to consumers and businesses. So have a look at this, and I'll explain a little bit after it's finished.
In 2016, the Competition and Markets Authority published a report about banking. It found that older, established banks didn't have to compete hard enough for customers. Newer, smaller banks were finding it difficult to access the market and to grow, which meant customers weren't given enough choice or control over their money or financial information. So, open banking was born to transform the way customers bank online. Open banking aims to re-energise banking by making it easier for customers and small to medium-sized businesses to give access to their transaction data, compare accounts, and access new products. So how does it work? Open banking allows you to give consent to regulated third-party providers to securely access your bank transaction history or to make payments. You could give consent to a regulated price comparison website to access your current account transaction history, to find a better account or overdraft for you based on your actual spending. Or for businesses, you could give access to your business bank account transactions, which could make accounting easier or speed up the process of applying for a loan. Open banking could help you move, manage, and make more of your money. You are always in control of what transaction information you choose to allow access to, and you can stop access to your data at any time. So here's an example of how open banking could improve the way you manage your money. Let's say you want an overview of all of your accounts with multiple banks in one app. You choose a Money Manager app from a regulated third-party provider which uses open banking. The app asks if it can access your account and transaction data safely and securely with open banking. If you consent to this, you'll be redirected to your own bank's website, where you'll log into your online banking as usual. Your login details stay private and are never shared with the Money Manager app. Your bank will ask you to verify it's you and confirm you're happy to give the Money Manager app access to your data, what type of data and for how long. You'll then be redirected back to the Money Manager app. The Money Manager app can now analyse your account transaction information to show you how much you're spending and on what types of things, which could help you manage your money more easily and effectively. Open banking has been designed to be safe and secure for customers. Every third-party provider enrolled in open banking is regulated by the FCA or a European equivalent and must comply with data protection laws. Plus, with open banking, you'll never be asked to share your password or login details. Your data is encrypted and you are in control of who has access to your transaction data and for how long. It's safe, it's secure, it's revolutionising the way we manage our money. It's open banking.
So that's a very brief overview of what it means. I mean, on a technical level, it's essentially like when you log in with Facebook to other websites. You click the login with Facebook button and it does it for you. Well, you do that with your bank and then they get the data. And data is key because if you have data, you can work things out. So all that's happening here is that it's the data transfer. When I started talking about open banking when it first came up, people thought, what do you mean opening my bank account? I'm not opening my bank to everyone. It's very, very different. It's more about the exchange. And there's a standard that everyone has to meet. And they mentioned the FCA. They're the guys that regulate your banks. So you're probably going to be in good hands with the FCA. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we move on to our speaker is some useful apps. So apps have been an interesting thing for finance because not only have they changed the way that we do finance, but they've changed the way that some of these things work for other banks as well. They've stolen features or they've learned from the competitors. So let's take a look at 4 or 5 apps that I think you might be interested in. And even if you're not interested in these ones, maybe some apps like it would be interesting to you as well. So let's start with the rise of what we call the app-based banks. So these are guys like Starling and Monzo. And you can see on screen now, this is the Starling app. And the thing to say about Starling and Monzo that a lot of people don't realize when they first sign up to them is that they are full bank accounts. They have all the same protections and all the same rights and responsibilities of a normal bank account. Now, sometimes we talk about money laundering and money mules. Some people will be told, go to Starling, download the app, take out an overdraft, delete the app, they can't find you anymore. That's absolute rubbish, okay? These guys are banks just like Nationwide, just like Barclays, just like anyone else on the high street. So do treat them seriously. But if there's Starling or there's Monzo, if you need to have a second bank account, very, very useful for second bank accounts, especially if you're thinking about a way to pay your bills, having a separate bills account. But actually, I have to admit, I've moved my main account to one of these online banks. I don't bank with a high street bank anymore because I like having all the new features, things like being able to see where my transactions have taken place with a map, being able to have pots within my same account so I can save money more easily. Lots of features, and the big feature that I liked really at the start was being able to freeze my card if I lost my card. So how many of you out there have ever lost a bank card and then phoned up and cancelled your bank card and then found that bank card straight away? Now you've got to wait for the card to be cancelled. Now you've got to wait for all the processes to happen. It's a really long process to go through. With these apps, you can just freeze it, find it, unfreeze it, which I really like. We're talking about banks. Well, what about if you want to make some money? Well, there's MoneyBnk's. We talked about investments and savings and ISAs the other day. Well, MoneyBnk's is a feature where you can attach a bank account to it. And every time you spend with your card, it will round up the spending to a limit. So, for example, to the nearest pound. And put that in an ISA account or a savings account for you. Or in a pension or investment pot, depending on what you pick on MoneyBnk's app. Now, this is not the only company to do this. This was one of the first to do it. But certainly those app banks that I talked about, Starling and Monzo, they've started to adopt that roundup methodology as well. So again, good ideas from one app being taken and being used around the industry. So you have more choice where you use your apps. One I quite like is Clio. Not an app, it's a bit of a different one. You give Clio the access to your bank accounts, and basically what it does is it looks at all that data we talked about and helps you make real world decisions. You use this, it's Facebook Messenger that you talk to Clio through. So you might not be able to see it great on the screen, it's a very small video, but this person is literally asking how much money have I got left for the month? How much have I spent on Uber? And the app is able to answer. You can also ask things like, can I afford to have a takeaway tonight? And Clio will say, roughly what, 20 quid? and then we'll tell you whether your budget can handle a £20 purchase or not based on your current spending. So using all that data with a bit of AI to make your finances much more straightforward and much easier to manage because you understand what's going on. And also, nice little use of GIFs, as you'll see just here. There you go. Little Simpsons GIF, just to round it off. The last one I'm going to talk about is Curve. Curve's an interesting one because it's not a bank or a credit card or anything like that, but it is a physical card. The way Curve works is you take all your normal bank cards, you load it into an app, and then your card, the actual Curve card you get in the post can be any card that you want from your app. So, for example, I have a Curve card. I have 2 credit cards and 3 bank accounts on there. At any time, I can go into my app. I can change which card I want to use, hit select, tap, and it's going to come from that bank account. Curve is a good example of an app that's changing how people think about their wallet, for example. I used to have a wallet filled with cards in case of emergency. I had a credit card in case I needed to get somewhere. I had my bank cards in case one failed. Now I can just carry one Curve card and I've got all those cards in one place. Not a service that was available 5-10 years ago. This is relatively new. So apps are changing the way that money is being used, the way we're interacting with it. And I suppose let's get some real talk on this in a minute. Before I do, these are all the apps I've just mentioned in case you want to go and find them. They should be available on both Google and Apple stores, I believe. Starling and Monzo, both banking apps. If you want a bank account, do have to have photo ID, but you can open a bank account on your phone in 60 seconds with a piece of photo ID. MoneyBnk's, if you'd like to try and think about savings and investments, especially with Roundup Saving. Clio, an AI-powered money manager for you, powered by Facebook Messenger. And Curve, allowing you to put all your cards in one place. But let's move on to Real Talk. And this week on Real Talk, I'm joined by Wani Yosepa, who is a FinTech team lead at GreySpark Partners. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing, Nick?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Just trying to get my head around Bitcoin. I think I might have to give it a go, see if I can make some cash. So I guess before we get started, let's have a talk about your job. So you're the FinTech team lead at GreySpark Partners. You want to say a little bit about what that involves and what kind of things you're doing?
Yeah, of course. So basically what we do is, as GreySpark, as a company, is we're a consultancy. So we advise people, organizations on capital markets, financial services, and we're very much focused on technology, also covering stuff like regulations and how that impacts our clients. And within that, we have a FinTech strategy team, which is a team I help lead up. And what we do is we advise people who are interested in fintechs, interested in vendors and people providing technology services, and understanding more about them from 3 different angles. So one main stakeholder, clients, we provide services to our financial investors. So people like private equity groups who invest for a living. So they want to find exciting companies to put money in and companies that will do well. And then, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, they'll sell them on and they'll hopefully make a profit for everyone. And then another major stakeholder we have is fintechs themselves. So sometimes they come to us and they want advice and they want to say, how do we connect more of our customers? How good is our product really? How does it compare to the competition? How can we grow? How can we, make more money, sell to more people? Is there any interesting other technology companies we could merge with and get more value? Those sort of strategic questions. And we also provide some services to banks themselves. So mainly on the capital market side, so sales and trading, but who use a lot of applications. So they use a lot of technology, thousands of applications. And we help them to decide, which are the best ones to choose for different areas, how they could develop further and make use of some of the trends and stuff that's coming out of fintechs and the changes they're making to the market.
Well, it's funny you say about the trends. My next question was about just that thing. So, we talked about fintech a little bit, and we've talked about some of the apps that I personally have seen in the past. What is it that you're seeing fintech doing to money and how we interact with our finances? Is there anything kind of you've noticed in the last few years that's shifting a little bit?
Yeah. So what I've noticed is, so what's fintech's done is kind of these new emerging fintechs have come. And they've kind of changed the whole landscape. So loads of banks who previously ran your high street banks, they're now changing their approach because they're realizing that consumers like what fintech have bought in a few different angles. So one of the main things I've noticed is the whole customer experience, user interface. And currently now, when you actually use, when you use technology now, is so much easier, so much more interesting to use and engage with. And stuff like being able to open an account with less clicks, removing that sort of stuff, that barrier that meant people avoided their bank per se.
Yeah, I mean, we run training courses, and there are times where I explain in my training courses about Starling or Monzo or Revolut or those kind of banks.
Yeah.
And there are young people that just go, all right, stop listening to me and just download the app. And by the time I finish my paragraph of information, they have an account and it's already set up. And just that speed must be helping push these kind of things forward, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it's encouraging people to have more ownership over their data. So you mentioned stuff like banking and that data being available. So stuff like, your credit score, loads of people didn't have access to that as often or as frequent. And now, if you go on a Monzo or you go on another bank account, now you can go and see your Experian credit score on demand and have access to that information. It's really important. And it makes people engage with it a lot more.
We said that it's data, isn't it? It's the more data you've got, the more you understand, the more you can leverage it. Okay, personal question for you. Let's forget like the business line. What's the most exciting thing about FinTech for you? I mean, you obviously do it for a job. You must have an interest. So for you, what's exciting at the moment?
So I find this technology really exciting. I know people talk about it a lot, but distributed ledger technology, blockchain, I think that's really exciting. How people can get the most use out of that. I also like the whole concept around APIs and different apps integrating with each other to try and get the best of breed in every sort of area. And one thing I'd say the most interesting thing about FinTech for me is the way how inclusive it is. So we've had clients who are providing services to remote regions of Pakistan, areas that didn't have banking services before, but they have mobiles because they're cheaper and able to access them. And being able to build that sort of app or that messaging service and being able to open up financial services and financial banking technology to everyone and around the region, I think that's quite impressive, and that's probably the main change.
And I guess that's one thing. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have considered that if you asked me the same question. I mean, in this country, yes, the FinTech stuff is making life easier, but in other parts of the world, FinTech is enabling people to bank for the first time ever in some places. And I guess that's... Go for it, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying it's very interesting. So I use example of Pakistan and it's stuff like, what they actually use in collateral is so much more different. So there, they use stuff like, cattle, that would be your collateral or your land. That's your collateral to go and get a loan. But with that loan, you can, create your business, hire more people, produce it and go further. So there's so many different angles to what it can provide.
Gotta love tech, hey? Gotta love tech. Brings people together. So I that's a really good example of FinTech, a kind of in action, I guess, and as an action for good, kind of helping people. Are there any warnings about FinTechs or any danger signs that people should consider? Because obviously with a lot of these new apps popping up, it can sometimes be hard to trust what you're reading. So any kind of warning signs you'd warn people about?
Yeah, so I'd say it's always kind of similar around owning your data. Always be wary about giving people your card information or that sort of information, your bank account, stuff that people can take advantage of. So where there's data's being saved, there's always going to be a possibility that some people will try and use that to a bad example.
Yeah.
But one of the great things about technology and FinTech is what you have if you go on your Google Play or you go in your iStore, it will rate the actual apps and their users, and you'll be able to click and see what's actually doing a good job.
Okay, so those ratings are really kind of the first.
Yeah, those ratings, and you see how many people have it. 5,000 people downloaded it. 1 million people downloaded it. It kind of provides more credibility.
And I guess if it's one person with a 5-star review versus 1 million people with a 4-star review, we know which one we're going to go for. Is the last one, right? So. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, common sense, but yeah, it works, and it's something I use personally before I download something.
See, people who know me and who work with me will know I say common sense, not that common. So sometimes got to put it out there, haven't we? So yeah, that's great. I think we're going to move on because time is running out. But Wani, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for talking about FinTech with us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. And we're going to get on. We're going to move into our top tips for the week as well. So thanks very much. Cheers. Oh, FinTech, eh? Technology changing the world, making sure that everyone can access a decent banking experience. Now, a few tips. These are mainly around apps, but you could apply them to most FinTech things, but let's go through them. Tip number 1, make sure you do your research before you're doing a new app. Just like we said there, if you're looking at reviews, make sure there's a decent number of reviews at a decent review level before you go ahead and pull the trigger, especially if it's going to cost you. If it's going to cost you, be really, really careful and make sure you've read about what it is you're paying for if you're going to pay for something. Make sure you keep all your passwords secure. In this day of technology and data being key, the more you keep your secure password, the more your bank is going to keep money safe, the more your apps are going to keep money safe, etc., etc. So make sure those passwords are nice and secure. We talked about that before. And lastly, consider whether the service you're using is useful to you or if it's just cool and you just want to try it, because that might not be a good reason to get it, especially with bank accounts. You don't want to open too many. Take out overdrafts, for example, because you might put yourself in a situation that you can't handle. So make sure you're using services that you need, and maybe leave alone the ones that are just, oh, that might be cool, but I'm never going to use it. So just something to think about. But that will wrap up our show for the week. So I just saw in the chat that we were feeling a bit depressed after the guy with the Bitcoin. He was happy. He was fine. And if you want a nice story about Bitcoin, the first thing that we know on record pretty much that was bought with Bitcoin, pizza. So yes, pizza. A man offered 1 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, brought to his house, freshly cooked. Didn't care if it was homemade or not. So it's 10 Bitcoins. And you remember I said that at the time, Bitcoins were worth like pennies. So the person who sold those 2 pizzas for those 10 Bitcoins would have made about £77,000 today. But they were happy at the time. Fine. We're going to wrap this on up. If you do want to get hold of us at any time, don't forget you can reach us at any of these social media channels on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Twitch. On Twitter, it's Periscope, if you have Periscope as well. You can also email us at info@mybank.org for anything you want to send us or anything you want to tell us. But for this week, I think that's going to wrap it up. My name is Nick Smith-Patel. I've been the Head of Education for Young Adults. I've been your host. We'll see you next week. Week 8, we are looking at economic abuse. We are looking at the warning signs and some of the indicators that your money and your situation might not be entirely safe. So we'll be talking to a couple of people from a group called Surviving Economic Abuse. Really looking forward to that one. Massive show, slightly different format next week, but do make sure you join us live 4 p.m. next week. Thanks very much. Take care. See you.